Greetings, everyone. I am James Milan, and this is the DPCD update. That's our Department of Planning and Community Development. And I want to welcome our acting director of that department, Kelly Lynema. Kelly, welcome.
Hi, hi, James. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm doing well, and I hope that you are too, as you are getting used to a just even more being put on your plate because you were a busy person before, and now you're the acting director of the department. So, first, congratulations, and second, good luck.
Yeah, thank you. Learning the ropes.
Absolutely. So, and part of those ropes is going to be doing these DPCD updates. So, we really appreciate, as we always did with your predecessor, Jenny Wright. Sorry, Jenny. We appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. And I just want to let people know we will talk about a few Bikeway related projects that your department is involved with. We'll get updates on those a little bit later. And we'll also want to hear about what's happening at Arlington's Affordable Housing Trust, which is something that Jenny and I spoke about on a number of occasions, how that work specifically relates to other housing plans here in Arlington. We figured, hey, isn't this a good opportunity for your first DPCD update to kind of give people a grounding in the necessity for housing plans, how those housing plans are organized here in Arlington, et cetera, just kind of an overview. So if you don't mind, we're going to ask you to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do understand before we start with that you have actual topical news on the housing front. So we can take, if you don't mind tackling that first, and then letting us know, giving us an overview, as I said, of housing plans here in Arlington.
Sure. So the first announcement that we're really excited about is that we submitted our 2022 housing production plan, which we call the Arlington Housing Plan. We submitted that to DHCD back in May, and we just received news about 2 weeks ago that DHCD approved the housing plan as submitted. So we now have an official housing production plan, which is very exciting after about a year of planning, a little bit more than a year of planning.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, if you don't mind, let's. I mean, we've now mentioned housing plans on multiple times in just a couple of minutes. So folks may be wondering, okay, so what is this all about? Why do we even have housing plans, et cetera? So if you don't mind backing up all the way to that point and just kind of giving us a sense of how housing plans are both intrinsic to the work that you do and to our community, and how they operate.
Absolutely. So I have a few slides here we can pull up. So this is going to be a little bit different than a typical DPCD update in that we're going to be looking backward a bit. But I think it's really important, especially because we continue to do work around housing. And I just want to kind of draw some clarifications for the planners among us and the non-planners among us between affordable housing plans, mixed income housing plans, fair housing action plans, the Affordable Housing Trust action plan, and what we're working on. So we can we'll go to the next slide here. This all really begins with the 2015 Arlington Master Plan. Now, the master plan set up a number of goals around housing and other topics, but particularly around encouraging mixed-use development that includes affordable housing, and then also what we call housing choice. That's how we typically refer to it in the planning community, but providing a variety of housing options for a range of incomes, ages, family sizes, et cetera. And two key recommendations of that plan were to plan for affordable housing. And what we mean by that is create a housing production plan. And I'll get to that in a second. But the second was to also use local resources like Community Preservation Act funding, community development block grant funding, et cetera, in the production and preservation of affordable housing. So what we did next was we created a housing production plan. We check off box number 1 here. A housing production plan is really something that communities use in order to understand where they're at with affordable housing, with the production of affordable housing, and understand where they need to go in order to reach or exceed the state's 10% affordable housing requirement. They include a number of components that are required by the Department of Housing and Community Development, like data assessment, understanding our physical and regulatory or zoning constraints, where housing production should be located, what the town's affordable housing goals are, and implementation strategies. I think an affordable housing or a housing production plan is really important because it allows us to understand where we're at and how to get to where we want to go.
Mm-hmm.
It also is a state mechanism for really registering our progress on that. And as we produce affordable housing and as we meet our stated goals in a housing production plan, it gives our Zoning Board of Appeals a little bit more flexibility in how it receives and responds to requests for comprehensive permits. So, you know, when somebody talks about a typical 40B, they're often referring to an affordable housing or a development that includes affordable housing that is not necessarily in line with our local zoning. But 40B is actually a whole chapter in Mass General Law. And so a housing production plan helps us meet those stated goals and understand where we're going. Oh, go ahead.
Can I ask just a question? And this
Sure.
goes back a little ways in what you were saying, that the state mandates that there be 10% affordable housing in any community, I assume is what you were saying?
Yes. Yep.
And in Arlington, I imagine our aspirations are for higher than that.
Yeah, and for some people, yes. I think one of the things that our housing production plans have shown us, both the 2016 and the 2022 housing production plan, is that more than 29% of Arlington residents are housing cost burden, which means they spend more than 30% of their monthly income on housing. And so if you think about how the state has this 10% threshold, but we have 29% of our residents who are in need of some kind of affordability relief, you could say that we might need to exceed that 10%. But first we need to get there. And so that's what our housing production plan guides us toward.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. We also, as I mentioned, we just received approval for the 2022 housing production plan. So that 2016 housing production plan expired in 2021. And so as we knew that was going to expire, we began work on this 2022 update. And again, it includes all of the same requirements for DHCD, and it really sets forth goals and strategies to get us through to 2027 regarding the production of affordable housing. We also have a fair housing action plan. Now, this is a little bit different than a housing production plan in that it's not exclusively focused on affordability, but it's really related to the 1968 fair housing law as established in the United States. This plan really demonstrates our commitment to affirmatively furthering fair housing in Arlington. And what that means is we want to ensure that there's equal opportunity for access to housing choice for members of protected classes. Now, when we talk about protected classes, we're talking about race, ethnicity, households with children. Protected classes are also like people with different ages, different disabilities. And we want to make sure there's an equal opportunity to access housing in Arlington and all of the benefits that living here provides. This plan really establishes some fair housing goals and establishes steps to remedy fair housing issues. Really, like, how can we eliminate segregation in Arlington? How can we increase housing choice in Arlington? And how can we ensure equitable access to housing-related opportunities? In addition to that, we have other plans that you know about. I'm sure you and Jenny have talked about. We have the Arlington Heights Neighborhood Action Plan from 2019. And in 2021, we completed Net Zero Action Plan and Connect Arlington. And so all of these things together, I think in summary, you could look at them and you could say, well, the master plan is really our overview. This is our guiding document that establishes the overall priorities. Those housing production plans are mostly affordable housing focused, and they really establish sort of year by year annual thresholds for how we can get from where we are to 10% of our housing being deed restricted affordable and even beyond. Our Fair Housing Action Plan is really about equitable access for protected classes. And then these other related plans all mention housing because everything is kind of systematically related. So it shows how housing is related to commercial development and how a neighborhood looks and feels. It shows how housing is related to climate change and resiliency, and how housing is related to issues of mobility and how people get around town.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that overview. And I do have a lot of questions that have arisen in my mind as I was listening to you, but I'll keep it to just a couple. One is that, as you were describing, particularly the goals of the Fair Housing Plan, and how you're seeking to make it equitably, basically equitable among a number of different classes with different needs, et cetera. That struck me as, wow, that's a wonderful thing to be working towards, and really, really hard.
Yeah.
So just give us a sense of what some of the challenges for implementing all of these plans are, basically, because we all as a community have a vision. We have a vision that then gets reflected in that master plan, we hope as accurately as possible. And then it's up to you and your department to do really the very, very hard work of making these things happen. So I'm not asking you to dig too deeply into the weeds, but just to give our audience a sense of, again, what the toughest things are in the path to getting to where we want to get to.
Sure. That is a very good question. I think I can think of two things that immediately come to mind. Regulatory issues and then also funding. So when we think about affordable housing in particular, but also just housing choice in general, we think about how our zoning might limit the ability to create housing. And so one of the things our department does is we work with our Arlington Redevelopment Board, we work with our zoning bylaw working group of the Master Plan Implementation Committee to really look at our zoning. Our master plan and then the housing production plan both had zoning audits. So those audits really took a look at our zoning and said, hey, if you really want to achieve these goals, here's some of the changes you need to think about making to your zoning. So these are the things that we take a look at every year with these groups. And we try to identify ways that we can adjust our zoning or ways that we can maybe allow for a little bit more flexibility in how this housing is created. And it takes time. It takes a lot of conversations with the community. The master plan was in 2015. That's actually quite a bit of time ago. It's hard for me to believe, but it feels like 2015 was just yesterday. But I think these are things that we kind of need to keep fresh in the community's mind and keep talking about how important they are to increasing housing choice and increasing the availability of affordable housing. And then the second one actually relates back to the Affordable Housing Trust. And this is about creating opportunities to finance affordable housing. It's incredibly expensive to build housing of any type in Arlington and in the region. And in 2021, special town meeting approved the creation of an affordable housing trust. And this is basically a separate legal entity in the town that's given the ability to finance, collect money, collect funds, finance the production and the preservation, the creation and preservation of affordable housing in town. A lot of people say they want affordable housing, but there are very limited resources in order to create it. And so this is basically creating a mechanism for us to sort of put our money where our mouth is.
Exactly.
And creating that affordable housing.
So I was going to ask you, in fact, how does the trust relate to all this? But I think you just described that. So I invite you to add anything else you would like to about that. But if not, we'll move on.
Sure. Actually, I'm going to show one more slide here.
Mm-hmm.
So as I mentioned, in 2020, we created the Affordable Housing Trust through town meeting. The Affordable Housing Trust right now, so in October of 2021, the select board appointed the members of the trust. And since then, they've been working on some orientation things, creating a declaration of trust. But most recently, they've begun working on an action plan. Now, this action plan is a 5-year plan. It's another plan, which is why I wanted to talk about housing plans. But this is really like a financing and strategy plan. So it's how we can take the money that the trust has now and the money that we anticipate receiving through Community Preservation Act or CDBG funding or through ARPA funding, and creating sort of a community-informed prioritization plan for how the trust can spend that money. And so we have begun the development of this action plan, but we really want it to be a community-informed plan. We want to know from the community, well, first of all, does Arlington have enough, do people in the community think that Arlington has enough affordable housing? And if not, what kinds of affordable housing should we be creating? Should we be focusing our efforts on? Should it be for people who earn an extremely low income, for people who earn a moderate income? Should it be for people who rent their homes or for homeowners? All of these sort of factors really come into play in how the trust can use this money. So one of the things we have out right now is a survey. It's the Affordable Housing Survey. And this is going to be open through the 4th of July. So while you're waiting for your sunscreen to set in, or you're waiting that 45 minutes before you jump in the pool after you've eaten, take a moment and go to tinyurl.com and slash affordable housing ARL. The URL is right here, and take that affordable housing survey. We really want to hear from people. And then we'll be coming back to the community in July. So, coming back with a forum in July to really talk about the results of that survey and kind of ground truth them with people who are able to attend. And then doing some listening sessions with focus groups. So looking at communities of people who rent their homes, or having a focus group with members of the BIPOC community to understand a little bit more about specific needs around affordable housing. We'll be presenting that to the community again in September, presenting the draft plan, and then bringing it to a joint meeting of housing stakeholders in October, and then hopefully to the select board, and where they'll approve the plan in late October.
That is just a wonderful explanation, I have to say, of exactly what I was referring to, the work that actually has to go in, the steps that need to be taken in order to make the visions that we all cherish and we all value, and make those visions into realities. And so thanks really for taking us through that, the multiple steps between now and sometime in the fall, when, as you say, the last step of the select board giving its approval is indeed taken. I particularly want to remind folks, because I get to talk to you, to Jenny before you, to other town officials, but in particularly the DPCD, there's clearly a strong component of getting community input as much as possible, as often as possible, and as accurately as possible, or as directly as possible. And again, that process you just outlined around the Affordable Housing Trust is a great example of that. And of course, it begins with the survey that you were mentioning, and that allows people, again, to let us know where their mouths are, that's for sure. And hopefully, again, the money will follow. I'm sure that we will be talking about this as our updates and as the process go forward. I'm sure we'll be getting more news from you about this. So, but thanks for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. ACMi is a key partner in making sure that we get the word out to the community on these kind of projects. So I'm really glad we're able to talk about it today.
Yeah, it's definitely good content for our community, no doubt about it. I do want to move on and say that another piece of the bedrock of the work that you do is transportation. And so I know that we had mentioned at the outset that there's a couple of transportation mobility related projects that you wanted to give us updates around. So please do so.
Sure. So we've had a flurry of public meetings at the end of June, trying to get everything in before everyone takes off for the summer. So last week we had 2 public meetings. The first one was to share the results of the Mystic to Minuteman Bikeway feasibility study. And so we had a virtual public meeting there. We will be posting those results or the report on the town website. And so that will be included with the email that includes this update. So we invite people to take a look. The next steps on that plan is that we're trying to pursue grant funding in order to move into design. And this was really just a feasibility study to understand whether we could do the project at all. And it seems like we can. The second public meeting is something that's going to be going on for quite some time. This was a meeting on Thursday night. It was our first in-person meeting in a very, very long time, where we had a meeting to discuss Mass Ave in Appleton. This is a key intersection. As I'm sure a lot of people know, there was unfortunately a cyclist who died there about a year ago. And we are looking to make improvements for safety and mobility at this intersection. And so the town is working on this plan. We've just started this public process. It's very open-ended right now. And we will be sharing opportunities for people to kind of share their thoughts and opinions as we move forward, including right now, if you weren't able to go to that in-person public meeting or you didn't feel comfortable doing so, we'll have opportunities for you that will be shared with the promotion of this video to invite people to participate and make their mark and help us know what our goals and priorities should be for this section of the Mass Ave corridor.
Well, we at ACMi happen to be located quite close to that particular intersection, and so many of us are moving through there on a daily basis, and we've noted the changes already, and clearly it is much it's much more obvious how we want to share the road there, but clearly there's more work that can and will be done. So good to hear again that is you know, that we're moving forward, but there's a ways to go, and people again will have an opportunity to weigh in if they weren't not there in person for that meeting. So we will make sure that you know, on our screen people have an opportunity to know what either the websites or the pertinent email addresses, et cetera, are in order for them to get their voices heard.
Thank you.
All right. I want to just ask you whether there's anything that we have missed. It's been a kind of a slightly elongated update, as it should have been. And again, the housing took up the vast majority of it. Is there anything that you'd like to add before we sign off?
Great talking to you, and I look forward to seeing you again in a few weeks.
All right, well, that's wonderful. I hope that your summer starts well, that you sunblock and eat properly around your pool times like the rest of us. And that
take that survey.
That's right, and take that survey. Perfect. So thanks again for your time. We'll look forward to talking to you again soon. Great,
thank you so much, James.
I have been speaking with Kelly Lynema. She is the acting director of our Department of Community Planning. Our Department of Planning and Community Development, as you might have picked up from what we've been talking about here. I'm James Milan. This is the DPCD update. We will see Kelly next time. We thank her for that, and we'll see you as well. Bye-bye.